The date is January 12th, 2018. Happy New Year. Okay, our new police union. What's that all about? Well, I think we have a dysfunctional police union going on now. And I think your regular patrolman is sort of at the mercy of some unsavory characters. You know, if I were a regular patrolman and I was told to do something that I knew was wrong, or not to do something, which I knew that was wrong too, boy, I wouldn't be too happy about that. I mean, if I was just a regular patrolman, you know, regular cop on the beat, as they say. Now, I grew up in Harwich, and I took judo for about 5 years. I didn't take it in the summer, but, you know, it was good. It was good for the kids, and I really benefited. There was a guy there, he was a police officer, Walter Ennis, and he was the lead dog. He was, and there was a guy named Taylor who came in once in a while, and there were a few other people helping out. So I kind of grew up in the police station down there in Harwich, which they have a new station, and it's named after Chief Rainio. And he's a pretty cool guy. He was, I remember him. All the cops were good. We got along good. The worst thing that happened with us was Halloween, you know. You'd get some shaving cream or whatever, and, you know, it was very light stuff. But nowadays, it's like, oh, the poor police now, they have such a hard time. The crime, the drugs. So, I mean, this business of having the police look the other way, I think we need a new union when the drugs are going on. Because the drugs are a foundational problem in our society. And I can remember when this first came about, I remember it being about the time, I remember we had a junior, maybe it was a 9th grade, I thought it was 8th grade, junior high school dance, I think. And I remember the cops had to come and get someone that was drunk, and I remember this memory of mine being tied to this new police deal whereby they were going to have these special drug cops. I don't know what the name was. You know, it wasn't drug cops. So I would say what our system should be would be about 3 officers per 20 are representatives for 1 quarter, and they get drawn via the ping pong ball from the ranks of the department, right from chief right down through to the, you know, dispatchers, as long as they've got at least, I don't know, 3 years experience on the force that they're going to represent, and 3 years maybe in the, I don't know, but that would seem reasonable. So they all get trained in some level of PR. Probably you don't need much for a small town police department. And you'd probably have regular Facebook work that would go along with your union work, which would take the ball away from, and this is my point, kind of these political type people, and just put the ball back where it belongs, in the hands of the people and the police, the regular cops, who want to do a good job. They don't want to be working for evil. They want to work for God. I can guarantee you that's true. Your regular cops don't show up to work for some political character, you know, who's playing games. They want to work and do a great job and be law enforcement officials, not political police. They don't want that. So that's another point. We don't want political police. Now, if you're covering up, if you're a regular cop on the beat and you know there are things that are going haywire, you know, up the chain of command, you have to shut your mouth. You can't be talking about that kind of thing. Or if you talk too much, they'll get you transferred out if you can't obey orders and follow the chain of command. Well, that's no good if the leadership is no damn good and they're working for political people. So what I'm trying to hedge against here is secret deals against the activists. That's me. SJFS, the activist, low-level activist. Secret deals against the Constitution. To thwart the Constitution is not a good idea. Secret deals against the public good to keep a lid on, let's say, the drug business, I would call the illegal drug business, and the legal, illegal / pharmaceutical, criminal drug business, which we have. And they all need to be supported by these oligarchy, I call it, people, and the party hacks are right there, getting the dirty jobs done, I would say. So no more dirty jobs, no more political police. Our new police union will be members of the public and rotational members every quarter at 3 officers per 20. These will be the representatives. And they'll be picked by a drawing of ping pong balls, and they'll all do their time. Reminds me of being on the Sea Holly. That was one of Bobby Brown's boats. And I wasn't on the boat all that long, but it was a hard-working boat, and we used to rotate. I didn't work the rail, but there were 3 other positions we'd rotate on the back deck. One of them was running the pots around, the other one was working the rail with the captain, the other one was pegging the lobsters. We called it pegging the lobsters back then. Of course, we had the bands. So to rotate this important work, it brings the officer closer to the community. Number one, that's so important. So if I see a cop and I know him from TV, Facebook, and I have a relationship with the officer, I'm more likely to say, hey, officer, you know that I'm living right next to this major drug operation, right? And that would have to be answered to by the, PR, put that up on the table. I don't think these cops have to answer to me at all, or you. And if I say there's a big drug house right next to me, which I'm not saying that now, but I did live at 26 Yarmouth Road in Hyannis, and that was the case. Drugs and bugs, the land of drugs and bugs, bed bugs, terrible bed bugs too. But they would do their drug deals right outside my door. Now the police could have said, Steve, if you don't like this, then we'll put a microphone and a camera there and we'll clean this mess out. Yeah, right. What they could do, or should do, that's Barnstable Police Department, knowingly having a drug house operational there, 26 Yarmouth Road. And I was there for too long. I mean, it really stressed me out. And I don't stress out easy, but between the bugs and the drugs, oh, it was miserable. So I think citizens want a better connection with all the police officers in their community. Now, I would say, too, that this kind of goes with the TNB, Town Nurse Based. And so you might have, let's say if you've got a city police department, you may have smaller substations, let's say within the range of, the ideal would be to me, in your fire department, ambulance range, roughly in that range. So that, you wouldn't have you'd have your big city full police department representation, but when it got down to the smaller scale, I think a police union with maybe elected people, that might work, elected to be on the police union and represent the officers so that they can get a fair wage, so that they can get treated fairly, and so that they treat the public fairly. Now there's a two-way street there. It can't be going all one direction. And I'm not saying it is, but I think we're going south with all this business of chaos in this country, where we don't enforce the law. That's not on our list of things to do if we're working for the police department. Well, it is. Okay, it is, but it isn't. It is and it isn't. Well, which is it? You know, if you're not enforcing the drug laws, all these people on heroin get to go down to the emergency room and check in. They're having a problem. And poor Sheriff Cummings does not know that it's his job to take these people on and to get them dried out. In the old days, if you had a sheriff that was complaining about all the drunks in his jail, they'd look at you like, what? You know, that's your job. You know, you should have good guards. Well, it's the same thing today, only it's a lot tougher job than just a bunch of alcoholics. So it's alcoholics and drug abusers. You know, if you were an alcoholic 40 years ago, you didn't have to go rob a bank to get your, money for a few pops, You could probably do a little of this and that and get by. And back then we had rooming houses too. Now I'm advocating we bring those back for some of the stragglers. So we need rooming houses, and we also need a J&Bs, that's job and bunk. And we also need the clubhouse. So with these three things, there shouldn't be any, and camps too, excuse me. I've got camps, and I've got that written up. Kind of like 3 sets of camps, kind of like an Americana camp, and then a Bohemian camp, and then a Christian camp, a religious camp. And these would be 3 styles of camps that we could set up so that if a cop picked somebody up that was a vagrant, and that's another thing, we need the vagrancy laws. The cops need this. The poor cops, I imagine, they're not doing well. They're not feeling good. But with all these ideas to straighten this mess out, then we'll be back on track. We had vagrancy laws, and we had places for people to go. And back then, I think, too, the DPW in the town of Harwich used to hire people that were marginal and get them on the payroll, to do road work, etc. These were people who were disabled. I remember them from my youth. But we're not doing that anymore. So there's all kinds of structural changes that I would like to see and I would like to help out on with my show, the Scannell Agenda. But one of those is our new police union. So the union, might be a 7-man board, elected board, and might have a term limit of, one term of 3 years to get people cycled in and out. Or maybe it's 2 terms. And that reminds me of the SHAB board on Nantucket, Shellfish and Harbor Advisory Board on Nantucket. It was a good elected board because it got issues on the table every year. So this would be the new police union. Public representation would be on the table every year. And yes, I advocate banning these private government worker unions, all of them. I think if you're working for the government, as FDR had the opinion, I do too, that it's inappropriate to be double dipping with dual representation. So this would be representation for the police officers, and they would have public help, elected officials, and they'd keep the police on track, and the police would be able to speak publicly about all the issues, whereas right now the police cannot peep a word. Oh my God, it's toxic. I know it's very toxic to the police force that they can't speak. With my case, the 1717, I call it, this historic battle for the salt ponds on Nantucket, and I'm number 7 in line on that battle. The police behaved very badly, and it was because they didn't have to answer through something like this. There was only one police officer on Nantucket that behaved badly, but he made up for the fact that they didn't get involved. It was the state police mainly acting badly. But there was one police officer, sergeant, and I was shaking like a leaf after he got through with me, after I was digging, and on my way home. I thought he was going to kill me, trying to intimidate me, but I kept going. So that's something that could have been reported. And now something else too ties into this police union, our new police union, and that is cameras. And also something I call AMP, Automated Military Presence. Now you want more cameras if you want to hire less cops, which I do. And I'm not so sure we definitely have to have college-educated cops, okay? You want your cops to have some traits, like my 2 uncles, Uncle John and Uncle Joe were cops, and my grandfather was a cop. Uncle Joe and my grandfather, Francis Degnan, my mother's father, he was a cop on the Providence Police Force, and Uncle John was a member of that police force too. He was a high-ranking guy. And there was some controversy there. He was after some bad guys, or something happened for Uncle John. He married an ex-nun. My Aunt Jean. Lovely woman, beautiful family. Anyway, Uncle Joe was a kind of a boot camp instructor for the LAPD, Joe Degnan. He was a great guy. And I think he was Marine Corps too. World War II. And anyway, you know, the Irish cops, you know. I think I have to brag because I'm Irish too. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think your Irish make good cops. Because I think I've got Irish traits. I'm not Irish, I'm American. Some of those traits are well, I don't know if you know many Irish people, but I think ability to get along, ability to be lighthearted and you know, let it run off your back. You're not going to get upset. And you might let someone argue with you if you're Irish, and you might work something out. Whereas, you know, some of the other races of this world, they flip a switch pretty easily, but the Irish don't. And the Irish make a good cop. They say the Irish made good domestics too, and probably many other things, politicians. But I think that's one of my traits. I had 3 security jobs in my life. One of them was Saquatucket Harbor when I was a kid, night watchman. The other one was Boyd's Campground down in Florida, Key West. That was a trip. That was putting out the campfires and quelling the parties. This was a huge campground. And, geez. And then I worked for Bill Burdick, was my boss. He was a cop. He was a Nantucket cop, and that was at the Nantucket Boat Basin. I can remember once that I escorted royalty. I think it was Princess Diana, I'm not sure, onto a yacht. I was told to escort her. That was a highlight of that night. I went swimming once to catch a thief, but I didn't catch him. He got away, stealing a boat. So that was good experience. But I think most of it is, you know, being there, looking out, and making your rounds. It's work. you have to be observant, you have to be alert, and you have to be tolerant, and you have to be this and this and this. You have to be somewhat sharp. You have to respect your chain of command. I realize all this. But I think our police officers really need help, and they don't like seeing me in this position, but they really can't peep. They can't say anything, you know. So if you're a cop and you want to say something and you can't say anything, because you might as well just find a new career, okay, if you go against these oligarchy, party hack type people. But I don't think it should be that way. I think cops should be able to speak out on a regular basis about social problems, about criminal problems, and too, I think that the social worker police officer is a thing of the future. Okay? The social worker cop. Maybe give a few people a second-hand squad car. And maybe pay them a little less. But if they can do that job, man, they're better suited to being a full-fledged police officer. In other words, if they're a social worker cop, they could work part-time at one of our clubhouses, and they could work at the J&Bs, and maybe they were ex-military, getting their feet wet in the industry, and so forth and so on. There's not enough mix between fire departments and the clubhouse, and there's not enough mix between the police and these clubhouses either. I will say, though, that the Barnstable Police and the Bay Bridge have always gotten along very well, and the Barnstable Police Department has always been in the Bay Bridge, at least, not so much Harwich, but Bay Bridge, because, you know, Hyannis is kind of a hotbed. They were always there and helping out, so to speak, and, you know, informing us and talking with us, getting to know us. Okay, so the social worker cops, that's a new arena, I think. They have something like that now, too. They're getting their feet wet in that area. But I think both for the fire department, too, the ambulance people, to have a presence in social work, I think that's the way to go. The best training is Dale Carnegie training, too. And I think if you're a cop, you should have to be at a certain level of socialization. That's just me talking. You have to be able to get it with people. That's kind of important. So with these new police unions, I think you want one representative, too, from the town nurse-based people, town nurse board, or a couple. And that means this is a system that I have designed, and it's a 7-man board, town nurse board, town nurse boss, town nurse base. Call it what you will. TNB, I call it. And there would be 25 town nurse oversight people. They'd also be out in the field doing work, social work, etc. And then your 3 ombudsmen or lawyers that would be your moderators. Because if we set up this town nurse-based system and it works, you can pile on duties that right now are quite expensive through the states. And there's a lot of fraud. I believe in going back to, with a lot of changes, but going back to local control of, they used to call it welfare, social services, care for the poor and disabled, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if we're going to call the drug thing a big disease, which I think is silliness, I don't believe in that. I think our druggies can go dry out at the county jail. Just in the days of old, we used to put the drunks to the county jail. You know, no big deal. Go dry out. But today, I think we need drug testing, too. And I say, because it's a lot simpler, drug test us all. And, of course, you might have your town nurse board override some people that, you know, that don't need to be drug tested. So these are structural changes, having a public police union that would represent our police. And I would go further and say all the government workers in the land should have this and not have their own little private unions, which have materialized and developed into oligarchy-controlled hotbeds of evil, basically. You can't work for God and work for the public good while you're representing private interests. These areas of service to the public should be pure enough that we don't have people stifled. And the important thing is that we have to admit that we're going off the track big time. So we need to have these structural changes. The police need to be people of goodwill, and they are not. I'm sorry, officers, but if you can't speak publicly and you can't arrest the druggies, and certainly you can't even help out with the illegal aliens, and this country is a goddamn mess. God doesn't like this disorder and chaos. So I would say the police officers are to be castigated, because you're going down this path of kind of like, I would say, evil representation. And I would base that not just on the DNA switch, because all you cops are going to line up with the criminal cop. That's the way it goes, right or wrong. You can be a criminal and be a police officer. If you get caught, you don't really get caught, because, oh, that would be bad for the police department, or that would be bad for, you know, the office of the sheriff or the offices of the state police, et cetera, et cetera. The state police just got in a lot of trouble here in Massachusetts for, you know, overtime corruption. I can tell you, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Whitey Bulger tried to make his defense because the police were working with the government. And FBI, police, Whitey, that's the case he was making for his case against him. And he wasn't allowed. I don't get that. He was not allowed to make his own case, but that was his case. I'm not saying he's innocent, but if that was his case to make and he didn't get to make it, what did we lose out on? You know, he could have named all the officers that were on the take in Boston, right? But he didn't go to, I guess it didn't get that far, did it? So the police are protected in their crimes. With this DNA switch, the cops, I think, are culpable. The local police are culpable. If the local police support your district attorney to do a crime, and your sheriff and your state police to do a crime and look the other way while there's a murder being committed, etc., or a murder being minimized, I think that is just evil as it gets. All right, that's the Scannell agenda. Thanks for watching.